On December 5th of 2007, a 19-year-old man went to a mall located in Omaha, Nebraska. Within about 6 minutes, he would commit the deadliest mall shooting in the United States. This is the twisted case of Robert Hawkins. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also monster truck driving. But anyways, today we're going over the case of Robert Hawkins and what he did in 2007 at a mall. You're going to learn about an evil man who wanted to become famous in the worst way possible. For our story, we're heading to the city of Omaha, Nebraska. Now, in 2007, Omaha had exactly 444,503 people living there. It's the largest city in the state of Nebraska and the 40th most populated in the United States. Omaha City was founded on July 4th of 1854 after a treaty with the Omaha tribe allowed new territory to be built. Nowadays, the area looks just a small bit different and is home to many people. If you find yourself in the area for whatever reason, I think you'll be A-okay. You could visit the Omaha's Henry Doorly Zoo and Aquarium, which is usually ranked as one of the top 5 zoos in the world. If you want, you could take a trip to the Durham Museum, which has exhibits covering history and culture to science and much more. If water parks are what you like, then the Fun Flex water park and rides is a good place to go cool yourself down from the sun. Unfortunately, however, I don't work at a water park, and a zoo is not the reason as to why we're in Omaha today. Robert Arthur Robbie Hawkins was born in Suffolk, England on May 17th of 1988 to Molly Rodriguez Hawkins and Ronald Hawkins. Before we get into Robbie's life, we're going to talk about his parents for a moment. In 1982, Molly was 16 years old and working at a store in the local mall in San Angelo, Texas. She was the 7th kid of 9 and really looking for someone to take her away and become her husband. Well, one day, a guy named Ronald Hawkins walked into the store. He was in the Air Force's Electronic Warfare Division, and Molly was stunned by him. I'm not sure what happened, but they ended up hitting it off, and within a few months, they got married. Not long after this, they ended up having their first child together, Cynthia, and Ronald and the family then got transferred to a base in Suffolk, England. A bit after she was born, however, things between Molly and Ronald became incredibly toxic. With a new baby around, constantly crying, neither of them were really able to be into each other anymore. So because they weren't having any bedroom time, Ronald started calling Molly rude names and saying how she wasn't hot anymore. To get back at him, she started having affairs with other soldiers that lived on the base. The things that Ronald did to get back at her for that was just sickening. But in 1987, Molly would end up getting pregnant again, this time with a boy, and she was hoping that this pregnancy would fix her marriage. In reality, it just made things that much worse. When Robbie Hawkins was born in May of 1988, he was a normal, healthy baby. His parents, however, at this point, started getting into literal fights, wrestling around on the ground. It was also found that at some point between the ages of 1 to 4, someone molested him, and we kind of have an idea who, though we don't have a name. It was a relative who he was left alone with that apparently tickled him in a way that made him feel odd. By the time that Robbie was 3 years old, he was a preschooler and very hostile. He was about 3.5 feet tall, weighing 34 pounds, but he was a menace. He would punch other kids or kick them in the groin when he got upset. When teachers would discipline him, he'd bite their hands. One time, he went up to a teacher that he didn't like and slammed her head into a door. Robbie was 3 years old acting like this, so you can imagine he was already on a bad path. His parents got divorced around this time, and a large custody battle began. Ronald would soon remarry to a woman named Candace, though. And from the time that Robbie met her, he did not like her. But by 1992, Ronald had moved his new family to an Air Force base that he got posted at in Omaha, Nebraska. At 4 years old, Robbie wasn't getting any better with his behavior, and so Ronald decided to take him to a hospital to ask psychiatrists what to do with him and his violence. The doctors asked Robbie why he kept hurting the other kids, and he just lowered his eyes to the floor and mumbled, "Because I'm stupid and bad." The doctors decided that they want to admit him to observe him because he was only 4 years old and already having such a bad time. One moment, Robbie could be peacefully playing with some Matchbox cars, and within a few minutes, he would be super upset and crying for a nurse. The doctors diagnosed him with attention deficit disorder, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder due to him witnessing his parents fight all the time. After a month of being at the hospital and on medication, the doctor sent Robbie home, warning Ronald that Robbie's recovery depended on continuing the therapy, and most importantly, having a stable and nurturing family environment. He was put on thorazine, an antipsychotic medicine, and Ritalin to treat the ADD. Unfortunately, that would be the exact opposite of what Robbie was going back to. His parents, Molly and Ronald, like I said earlier, were going through a custody battle. One time, Molly was taken away in handcuffs because she was threatening Ronald's new wife, Candace. Even though Molly also got remarried to a guy named Mark, who was actually a friend of Ronald's, Molly started to just kind of give up on the custody battle because she wanted to start a new family with Mark. Candace, Robbie's stepmother, had called the police multiple times on Molly for child endangerment, and within a bit of time, Molly decided to just give up the custody battle. She surrendered her visitation rights to Robbie and wanted to let go of her past. Let go of your past? That's your child. That's your present. But on the last day of Robbie's visitations, he was over his mom Molly's house, and she called into her room to explain the situation to him. Robbie was so young at the time that he didn't understand that his mother was telling him that she was going away and never coming back. As the years passed, his mother abandoning him would affect him tremendously. Robbie decided to turn all of this anger towards his stepmother, Candace. If he ever started to have an outburst, his father, Ronald, would pin him on the floor for up to an hour to calm him down. Meanwhile, Candace would slap him with the back of her hand. By the time Robbie was a teenager, at age 13, he was smoking cigarettes and absolutely hated his stepmother. One time, he poisoned her with a pesticide. She was out working in the yard, and when she wasn't looking, Robbie put some into her drink. She took a sip and thought it tasted weird, and so she stopped drinking it. Later into the night, she felt sick and somehow found out that Robbie had poisoned her. When she asked him why, he just laughed and pointed out the fact that she was still alive. One time, Candace went into Robbie's backpack looking for cigarettes, and he flipped out. She responded by slapping him across the face, and her ring ended up cutting his forehead. In response to this, he balled up his fist and quietly said that he's going to kill her. Candace wasn't taking any chances on this threat and felt like Robbie could actually go through with it. To protect herself, on Robbie's 14th birthday, he was admitted to yet another hospital and got yet another large dosage of medication. While talking to the doctors, they insisted that he apologize to Candace, but Robbie just sat blankly and refused to acknowledge what happened. He did say that he hopes they get into a car accident though, and that if the doctors return him to his stepmother, he knows where the knives are located and that Candace would leave the house in a body bag. Robbie was still in the hospital this year, or 2002, and on Mother's Day, all of the patients were told to draw cards for their loved ones. Well, Robbie drew a picture of a noose for Candace, so you can obviously tell how he felt about her. It wouldn't be too long after this that Robbie's father, Ronald, drove up to the juvenile court and asked the judge to take Robbie over. Ronald's health insurance had run out and he could no longer afford to pay the bills. Molly, Robert's mother, wasn't at this hearing and she wasn't even informed it was a thing. But she was a little busy raising her own family by then. Within literally 8 minutes of going into the courtroom, Ronald gave up custody of Robbie, and the State Department of Health and Human Services became his legal guardian. What a father, right? About 2 years would pass, and Robbie, who was now 16 years old, just spent most of his life in multiple treatment centers. At the first one he went to, he got into multiple fights and was by another student. After this, they transferred him to another treatment center, this time a home for boys. Here, he was under very strict isolation, and he was rarely allowed to leave the campus or make any phone calls. The only person that Robbie was really trying to get in contact with was his mother, but he was never allowed to call her. Robbie at 16 was underweight, he had long hair, and he bit his nails down to the nub. He was very depressed, had life-ending tendencies, and he was also just diagnosed with something called antisocial personality disorder. This makes it difficult for the person who has it to feel empathy about others. It's a common trait that's found in serial killers. Around this time, Robbie began drawing and had a heavy belief for Satan. His doctors wanted him to apologize to his stepmother, Candace, for what he's done and said to her. They told him that if he didn't apologize, he was going to be sent to another institution. Robbie told them that if they send him there, he's gonna burn the mother place down and all of the people in it. So one day in 2004, Robbie's doctors set up a meeting with his stepmother, Candace. Within the 2 years that Robbie was there, he was getting therapy sessions 2 times a day, doing novel work like equine therapy or working with horses, and he was ready to apologize to Candace. During their meeting, Robbie asked Candace if she could forgive him for him saying all of those hurtful things when he was mad. Candace didn't accept his apology, and she told one of the doctors that it was obvious that Robbie had been coached to say that. Candace also said that she will never feel safe with Robbie in the house, and if Ronald, his father, ever brings him home, she's divorcing him. Robbie had a roommate at the center he was at, and his name was Dallas. They both had long hair, kind of looked similar, and together swore an oath of brotherhood, and they used purple rubber bracelets to signify who they were. They called themselves the Purple Skulls. The doctors at this treatment center actually noticed that if Robbie and Dallas weren't together, they would get into more trouble. So they really tried to make sure to keep them together. Robbie looked at Dallas as a brother, and in heart, they were even closer than that. By this time, Robbie was still 16 years old and living at the treatment center. He started talking to Dallas about how much he missed his mother Molly and how he wanted to be with her. Molly was all over the place at this point because her marriage was failing, and she was seeing 3 to 4 guys at once and bouncing from house to house. So stability was really not in her life. In December of 2004, Robbie was relocated to a foster home run by a grandmother named Marty Glass. She had 10 kids of her own, and even then, still took in almost 24 other kids to help raise. Robbie, for the first time in his life, felt appreciated here, and it was like people understood him. He was outdoors all the time, helping to add a new addition to Marty Glass's front porch. But Robbie still wasn't being the best person. He was attending Fort Calhoun High School, but failing miserably, and he was robbing gas stations and selling the good green to middle schoolers. The winter that he spent here, he told people, was the best time of his life. While at Mrs. Marty Glass's home, Robbie was allowed access to her phone, and he was able to call people for the first time in a long time. He called his sister and convinced her to give him the number to his mother. After a bit of pleading, his sister gave him the number, and Robbie made a call. At first, his stepfather, he never met or knew, answered the phone, and Robbie asked the question, "Do you remember somebody named Robert Hawkins?" To which the stepfather said, "Of course I do," and then he handed the phone over to Molly. Molly didn't recognize who was on the other end until Robbie said, "Mommy, it's me, Robbie." To which Molly replied, "Oh my God, Robert, how are you? Where are you?" Molly was now, after many, many years of not being in his life, going to abruptly now kind of be in it. Only a few days after this initial call, Molly went to Marty Glass's house and sat on the front porch with Robbie. He sat on her knee as she bounced him up and down, kind of like a little kid. Marty Glass saw this happening and started telling Molly how she shouldn't treat Robbie like a baby. Molly responded by saying, "But he is my baby. He's my baby boy." She then convinced Robbie to get a haircut to cut his long hair. She bought him a used Jeep Cherokee, one that was in good condition, and she promised him he could keep it if he finished high school. By the next time Robbie had court for custody issues, he went wearing a nice shirt and a tie. The judge told him that he was sharply dressed and that he's proud of him. But regardless, the judge still wasn't able to send Robbie back home because his stepmother Candace refused to let him back. Ronald, Robbie's father, was siding with Candace on this option. The judge was furious and yelled at both of them about how it's not his responsibility to raise their kid. Unfortunately, once again, with nowhere to go, the judge was forced to keep Robbie at Marty Glass's home. Robbie decided to ask his caseworker to ask his mother Molly if he could stay with her. Molly said that she didn't want Robbie living in her house because in her gut, she felt like he was dangerous. She said given what his father was like, you have to be careful, and that she was afraid of what he might do to her other children, all girls. Another problem with Robbie was that he was so angry by this denial of his mother because for the second time in his life, she rejected him, and so he stopped talking to her for almost 2 years. A few months would pass, and in December of 2005, the now 17-year-old Robbie's stepmother Candace divorced his father. Robbie was now allowed back to Ronald's home. He really wanted to work, but couldn't because he decided to drop out of high school and didn't have an education. He also couldn't drive a car and lacked social skills because he was put into treatment centers for a huge part of his life. Robbie really struggled to find a job, and eventually he just gave up looking. A little bit after this, he got arrested for smoking the good green, and he was put under house arrest. At one of the court's hearings on August 21st of 2006, Robbie was somehow able to convince the judge to release him from the state's supervision. By this point, the state spent about $265,000 on treatment for him, and his caseworker told the judge that they weren't really benefiting him anymore. This same day, the judge decided to make Robbie a free man and let him roam the world, which within about a year would prove to be an awful idea. A few months prior to this court date, Robbie had stormed out of his father's home with no plan and started sleeping in a car with someone who did. In September of 2006, Robbie was out partying with his good buddy from high school named Will. They got very wasted, and by the end of the night, Robbie was sleeping on the lawn. Will's mother, Deborah, opened her front door and saw Robbie curled up in a ball and felt really bad for him because she knew that he was homeless and had no money. She decided to let him stay at their house for the time being. Deborah recalls Robbie being like a lost puppy who would follow her around with his head down, but he was really polite and she felt sorry for him. She helped Robbie get some jobs and only charged him $50 a month for rent. This included 3 meals a day and being able to sleep on an air mattress in a separate room that was very tiny. During the next year and some change, Robbie found a group of friends through Will, and they got along well. Robbie was looked at as the McLovin character of the group. He was pretty dorky and awkward, but was apparently really funny. Within a few months of staying at Deborah's, Robbie was able to get his driver's license after 5 failed attempts. He ended up asking his dad to help him buy a car, and his dad did, a white Cadillac. Robbie really loved this car because it was the first thing in his life that was his. He decided to get a job working at McDonald's to help pay for it, and apparently he used to tell his friends about how when he'd make it big, he was going to have the car dipped in gold. Things in Robbie's life were starting to look up, and he even got a girlfriend, a 16-year-old named Casey. The two of them were inseparable and always talking on the phone if they weren't with each other. Casey said Robbie would cry all the time because he had no family and was really upset about his mother abandoning him. Unfortunately, even though things seemed to be looking up, in reality, evil was bubbling beneath the surface. Robbie smoked the good green all the time and was always drinking. This was a problem because this is where all of his money went. If he'd get a raise, it'd go right to his habits. He was only paying $50 to live at Deborah's, and she started feeling like he could pay her more and that he was kind of conning her. Meanwhile, Robbie's job didn't pay very well, and so he attempted to get money in any way he could. He applied to many different places, but kept getting turned down. He also enlisted in the army and told all of his friends that he was going to make it to become a general, but he was immediately rejected because of his previous mental health issues. Robbie really started to go into a downward spiral and really started saying alarming things. Friends of his say that when he got upset, he'd say how he was going to take a bunch of people out. Robbie also tried his hands at selling, but failed because he borrowed $400 worth and ended up smoking it all. When that didn't work in his favor, he decided to try his hands at selling. He put every last dollar he had into buying it, but he ended up getting robbed and lost everything. After this happened, Robbie went to his best friend from the treatment center's Dallas's home. He was really upset and bawling his eyes out, saying that he owed some pretty serious people some money, and also about how he wanted to take himself out. About a year would pass, and in September of 2007, Robbie was incredibly depressed and decided to reach out to his mother, Molly, again. She was ecstatic to hear his voice, and just like the time before, she immediately put herself into his life again, this time apparently trying to help him. Molly was doing fine with money because of the fact that her ex-husband paid her rent, and an older man paid her to keep her company. Not really sure what that means, but she wanted to help Robbie get onto a better path, and so she made him sell his Cadillac because it was using too much gas, and she gave him the Jeep, even though he didn't finish high school. Molly bought a new stereo for the Jeep and had it installed also. Once again, things were kind of looking better for him, but only for a short while. Literally, only a few days after Robbie put the Jeep into his name, On November 24th of 2007, he was arrested for drinking beer in it with his friends. His charges were for suspicion of contributing to the delinquency of a minor and 2 alcohol charges, one of which was underage possession of alcohol. He was positive that he was gonna go to jail given his prior record. Molly tried to tell him that he could get the hearing delayed until after the holidays, but Robbie wasn't listening, and so the hearing was set for December 19th. Things from this moment would really ramp up. Within a few days, Robbie threatened a teenager who lived in the area. He said that he was going to kill her family and burn her house down because he thought she stole his CD player. The girl didn't press charges because Robbie was known to explode and just go off on people, but never did anything. Next, he decided to completely destroy his relationship by cheating on his girlfriend, Casey. Robbie decided to go on a date with a coworker of his from McDonald's at the same time that he was dating Casey. When Casey found out that Robbie took this girl home, she decided to confront him about it. Robbie was obviously in the wrong and kept going back and forth between being mad and trying to get Casey to forgive him. Eventually, he hung up the phone and decided to go to his mother. He wanted advice for what to do with Casey, and let's just say Molly didn't give him the best advice. Molly told Robbie that she doesn't view what he did as cheating, and because he's only 19, he's not expected to stay faithful, and that he's young and forgivable. Robbie took what Molly said to heart, and he decided to call Casey on Tuesday, December 4th, sometime in the afternoon, to tell her that he was going to keep seeing this new girl, and his word choice wasn't exactly nice. It made Casey cry, and she asked him how he could be so mean to her. To which Robbie replied that this was a weird time in his life, and that he doesn't know how much longer he's going to be around. He then explained how he planned to take himself out. Casey was really upset by this because her past with guys just wasn't good. 2 of her ex-boyfriends before Robbie had both committed the endgame, and another one was now saying he was going to. Very interesting odds. But Casey decided that she was going to let it go this time, instead of trying to talk Robbie out of it and back into her life. She was so mad that he broke her heart, she wanted nothing to do with him. After this conversation, Robbie went to his mother's house for dinner, and what he'd do next would be absolutely shocking. By the time that Robbie got to his mother Molly's house, she was so happy to see him. She thought he looked like he was doing pretty well. In reality, he looked awful. Eventually, they'd have dinner together, and a conversation began about Robbie and his now ex-girlfriend, Casey. He said that he felt guilty about what he did, and so Molly told him, well, if you feel bad about it, maybe you shouldn't have done it. Robbie then said that he guesses she's right, and they started talking about other things. He revealed that he was fired from his job a few days prior because the cash register was short on his shift. He said that the manager made him empty his pockets and took $12 from him. Molly said that he can't do that and asked if he wants her to go down there and get his money back. Robbie said no and that it wasn't worth it. When they finished up with dinner, they got onto Molly's computer and started looking at job applications in the area. After this, Molly left the house to go shopping, leaving Robbie alone. Once he was sure that she left, he went upstairs into the master bedroom and went into a closet and took his stepfather's AK-47. He then covered it up and put it into his Jeep. After that, he went back into the house, sat on the couch, and started listening to his iPod. It was 2007, okay? But at the time, Robbie's favorite band was Judas Priest, and his favorite song was Hell-Bent for Leather. About a half an hour later, his mother returned home, and Robbie was still sitting on the couch. He then got up and hugged her really tight and left the house, not really saying anything. After leaving his mother's house, Robbie went back to his friend Will's where he was living at the time. He showed the rifle that he took from his stepfather to Will, and they took a picture of it and sent it to a few friends. At about 11 p.m., Robbie then smoked a few cigarettes before going to bed. By the next morning, Robbie woke up and his plan was to use the gun for target practice, but his mother Molly discovered that he stole the rifle. She called the Maruka's house phone where Robbie was staying at and left a message saying, "Tell Rob to call his mother right away." Will told Robbie that his mother called, and he replied by saying, "Oh man, she found out I took the gun." Will replied back by being kind of proud of him, and Robbie promised Will he'd return it. Instead of doing that and calling his mother back, he decided to write a few notes, which we'll now go over. In this first one, he's saying sorry to his family and about how he's a burden and how they're all better off without him. He also says that he was a constant disappointment and how they should remember the good times they had together. And then he says, "I love you" to all of his family members. This one he wrote to his friends, and he's saying sorry about what he's done to them and how he's been an awful person. He says that he knows everyone will remember him as some sort of monster, but because he was a burden. He also talks about how he's going to be famous for doing what he's doing and that he didn't eat a sandwich or the toilet thing either. I have no idea what that means. And in this last one, he wrote a will saying that he's going to give his car back to his mom and that his friends can have whatever he leaves behind. Robbie left these notes on his bed and then drove over to see his good friend Dallas. When he got there, the two of them sat on the couch and played video games for a while until Robbie tossed the controller away and started talking, and then he began crying. He started complaining to Dallas about everything that's wrong. This included how he was going to be kicked out of the Maruka's family home, how he ruined his relationship, the fact that he was going to be facing jail time soon, and didn't have any money to pay the fine or a lawyer. Robbie also started saying that he was afraid his mother was going to take back the Jeep, and that he didn't know how he was going to get around anymore. He was also afraid of what people were going to do to him in prison. Robbie was a nervous wreck, and Dallas told him that he loves him and he's here for him. Robbie asked to borrow Dallas's phone, to which he told him, yeah. Robbie then called Will and told him he's sorry for everything he's done, and Will tried to calm him down. Will called out for his mother, Deborah, because he was afraid and thought that Robbie was going to try and take himself out. Deborah got on the phone and told him that whatever it is, it's no big deal and it can be resolved. Robbie told her that he just wanted to thank her for all the stuff she's done for him and that he's sorry. He then abruptly hung up the phone and tried to call his mother, but she didn't answer, and so he left a voicemail. Next, he sent a text message to both his new girlfriend and his ex-girlfriend, Casey, saying that he loved them and he was sorry for everything and he was going to have a standoff. Robbie then told Dallas he was going to leave the house, and the two of them stood at the front door hugging. Dallas said that he felt like Robbie wasn't actually in his body, like it wasn't actually him. After Robbie left the house, Dallas turned on the TV because he was thinking if Robbie was really going to do something, it would be on the news. On the other side of town, Robbie's mother, Molly, was on the hunt looking for him. She was so worried that he was going to sell the gun to an ex-con to get a tattoo or something, and she was so angry at him. She called Dallas and told him that if he sees Robbie, to not let him out of his sight and to tackle him. Dallas agreed. Molly was going to the police station to report Robbie and what he did, and while she was on her way there, she looked down at her phone. She then realized that she had a missed call earlier from Robbie. Immediately, she played the message, and she heard Robbie say,
"Hi, Mom, it's me. I just wanted to let you know that I loved you. I'm sorry for everything. Let's see See you later. Bye.
Meanwhile, Robbie Hawkins had gone to the Westroads Mall in Omaha, Nebraska. He was 19 years old, wearing a Jack Daniels t-shirt over a sweatshirt and looking pretty ominous. He walked into the south entrance of the Von Maur department store at about 2:36 p.m. After walking for a bit into the store, he paused for a moment and then turned around and left. What he was doing was scoping out the place. Robbie then went out to his Jeep, grabbed the AK along with two 30-round magazines, and he hid them underneath of his sweatshirt. He walked back inside of the Von Maur department store and rode the elevator to the top floor. Christmas music was playing and joy was in the air as people were doing their yearly shopping. Robbie, in the elevator, took the gun out of his sweatshirt and waited for the door to open. He then walked out and crossed the hall to the girls' 7 to 16-year-olds section, and he saw two women here working. Their names were Maggie Webb, who was a store manager, and Angie Schuster, who was a manager in the children's department. Robbie shot and killed both of them. When people first heard the initial shots, everyone started running in a panic to get out of there or to get cover. As people were trying to scram, Robbie shot a guy named Jeff Schaffert in the arm while he was shopping for a dress for his 2-year-old daughter. He ended up surviving. Next, Robbie saw a man named Gary Scharf who was shopping during a break from a business trip. Gary was trying to help a woman off of the elevator. Robbie shot him and took his life. He then saw another man named Gary Joy, who was a janitor running trying to find safety. Robbie leaned over the balcony and from about 40 feet away, shot him and killed him instantly. Continuing his rampage, he walked towards the gift department, and this is where he saw saleswoman Janet Jorgensen. She was 67 years old, and Robbie took her life as she attempted to back into a corner. Next, Robbie headed for the customer service desk, and this is where Deanne Trent, who was a customer service worker, called 911.
Hello, 911.
Hi, I am at Von Maur.
Yeah, we're on our way out there, ma'am. Has anybody seen the person that's doing the shooting?
I have not, but I'm very scared.
Okay, yeah, we're on our way out, ma'am.
Okay.
Behind the counter was Diane, who was 53, Beverly Flynn, who was 47, Fred Wilson, who was 61, and Mickey Oldham, who was 65. Robbie shot all of them and ended up killing both Diana and Beverly. Fred and Mickey ended up surviving. Then Robbie saw a 65-year-old man named John McDonald who was shopping with his wife. They were hiding behind a chair in the corner of the department and were originally waiting for a gift that was being wrapped by the employees. He shot and killed John, and after this, he was still right next to the customer service counter. At this moment, Robbie, I guess, was done, and with one final act, decided to commit the end game. After this all occurred, an autopsy was done, and it was found that Robbie had a little bit of the green good in his system and a very small amount of Valium, less than the prescribed dose. Robbie was of a sound mind when he committed this terrible atrocity. Why he did what he did, we can only assume it being a result of having an awful childhood and multiple different stressors, though those are definitely never a reason to do that. As to why he chose the mall or the department store Von Maur, that's not really known. Normally, people around his age who tend to do similar things lean more towards schools. In Robbie's case, because he was in and out of schools and mental health facilities all the time, it's possible he didn't really have a connection with people in school. Robbie was an awful person who deserves zero sympathy for what he did, regardless of what happened to him when he was a child. There's just no excuses. In a matter of a few minutes, he murdered 8 people and seriously wounded 4. Those 8 people that passed away all had lives and families of their own. Maggie Webb was 24 years old and just became a manager at Von Maur. She started working there when she was a senior in high school. She was a very energetic woman who was sweet and bubbly. She had many friends and family and was overall a great person. Angie Schuster was 36 years old and a manager in the girls' department of Von Maur. She worked there for about 10 years. She had a sister, parents, and a ton of friends, and was very happy in life with a new man she had recently met. She originally graduated from college and was going to be an elementary school teacher, but couldn't find any positions, and that's how she began working at Von Maur. Gary Scharf was 48 years old and was a great father, son, friend, etc. He had a successful career as a sales manager in the AG chemical industry. He was on his way home after a business trip when he decided to stop by the mall. Gary was devoted to helping people and was overall a very good person. Gary Joy was 56 years old and a janitor at Von Maur for a long time. He graduated college and had gotten a degree in literature, and he really loved writing poems and stories. He was a hardworking man who was reliable and very well liked. Gary knew every coworker's name and loved joking around. Janet Jorgensen was 66 years old and working in the Von Maur's gift department basically since the store opened. She had children and a husband that she left behind. Everyone loved her because of her outgoing personality. Diane Trent was 53 years old and was a store employee of Von Maur. She had a husband and many good friends and family. Originally, she was an airline stewardess, but she wanted to be closer to her family because her husband, Pete, passed away unexpectedly. She had really great people skills and was always smiling. Beverly Flynn was 47 years old, and she worked as a gift wrapper at Von Maur and also as a real estate agent. She was a very sweet woman who left behind a husband and a few children. John McDonald was 65 years old and had retired from working 7 years prior. He had 2 children and a wife of 40 years named Kathleen, who was actually with him this day. The 2 of them were getting Christmas gifts wrapped at Von Maur. When Robbie began his rampage, they tried to hide behind a chair, but sadly John was shot and killed. His wife said he was one of the greatest people anyone could hope to meet, and he had a fantastic sense of humor. It's very unfortunate that these people had to meet such a tragic fate, as when you hear about them, it's always nothing but good things. I'm not sure why these type of things tend to happen to good people, but I really hope that they're all resting peacefully. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please subscribe and hit the like button because that's all we do. I also have a second account with my brother named Horrifying where we tell stories about everything paranormal. This includes true crime, mysteries, and things that are just downright spooky. I'd greatly appreciate if you subscribed to that too. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.